Welcome back, everyone, and happy 4th of July weekend. You know, many people like to challenge history. I'm sure you've noticed, but I'm different. I like studying our history and telling the untold stories of our great nation. Case in point, the mystery behind General George Washington's spy ring. You know the first president's remarkable victory over the British, but you probably don't know the men who helped bring him that victory in the Revolutionary War, the men who fought alongside him, especially those who spied for him. His spy ring was top secret until the 1930s, and now their skill, their valor becoming more apparent by the day. Here's a look at George Washington's Secret Six. With Nathan Hale hanged and New York lost to the British, Washington knew he can't win the war unless he won New York back. So how would he do that? He'd form a spy ring. He needed people that were loyal to him and yet unsuspecting to the British. Where would he go to get those people? To his right-hand man, an officer, Benjamin Talmadge, who grew up in that very house and knew the area, and he knew who could be trusted. And he also knew where to go first, Abraham Woodhull. This is where the Woodhull farm was. It went on for acres and acres. And this is where Abraham Woodhull grew up. Now, to the British, Abraham Woodhull was just a member of a farming family, uninterested, unaffiliated with the war as it went on. But to Benjamin Talmadge, he knew his childhood friend was much different than that. He knew he could be trusted. This is where intelligence came in and intelligence came out. I'm talking about troop movements, battle plans, morale of the British troops. That all came to Abraham Woodhull. And he was so trustworthy that he became chief of the Long Island spies. So Abraham Woodhull and Benjamin Talmadge had the ring up and running. But they still needed something. They needed something to get him into British headquarters, behind enemy lines. And that's what brought him here to Oyster Bay, New York, to this house, home of Robert Townsend, Abraham Woodhull's good friend. The British had taken over his house. They forced his entire family really into one room. And he had a cover story. See, he had a business in New York. He was a merchant, so he could function there. And he was motivated. You put those two together, he became Culper Jr. in New York City. So this is where Robert Townsend worked, Greenwich Street, New York City, behind enemy lines as a merchant and a spy. And it's also where he linked up with the ring's only female member, Agent 355. We still don't know her name, but we know exactly what she did. She penetrated the social circles. Together, they provided Washington with invaluable intelligence, but they were not alone. This was the home of the Rivington Royal Gazette. It was a loyalist newspaper. Its printer, its editor, James Rivington. At some point during the war, he became a patriot. Oh, he'd still interview the British officers, the British soldiers, but he'd send that information, that newspaper, back to Britain. What did he do with the intelligence? Well, he'd bring that to George Washington. Now, picking up and dropping off that intelligence, another citizen spy. See this building behind me? Over 200 years old. It's somebody's house right now, but it was once owned by Austin Rowe. Yes, the owner of Rowe's Tavern, a thriving bar in the area. He is a key member of the spy ring. Now, when word got out that intelligence had to be picked up in Manhattan, who better to go pick it up than the owner of a bar who needs supplies? So he would get on his horse and go 55 miles through the British troops onto a ferry over to Robert Townsend. He'd pick up the intelligence or drop off the intelligence, get back on that horse, go back on the ferry, 55 miles again, right to the water's edge, at which point he'd hook up with Caleb Brewster. It was locations like this one, right at the water's edge on the Long Island Sound, where Caleb Brewster, who handled the sea travel, would hook up with Austin Rowe, a spy that handled the land travel. Now, Brewster, a key member of the spy ring, also had a crew with him and a whaleboat. On the front of that whaleboat was a cannon. So he would get the intelligence and have to go 36 miles to Connecticut, where Washington had a courier there. Now, oftentimes he had to avoid British ships because the Navy was essentially camped out in the Long Island Sound. He'd have to often get intelligence from Washington and bring it right back. This happened over and over again, Brewster to Rowe, over the course of 4 years. How did they function? Well, their successes are mind-blowing, and because of that, you have little museums popping up all across the country in tribute to what they did. I mean, think about it. Instead of names, they used numbers. Instead of locations, they used codes. And the way they communicated, on pages like this, using invisible ink.
The effectiveness of this ring would be so extraordinary that it would prompt one noted British major to conclude, Washington did not really outfight us, he simply outspied us.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.